What's up, guys? Welcome back to Talkin Hawkins, our Stranger Things in review. Welcome to Project Potter, guys. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of our Stranger Things in review, guys. These are dropping every Sunday night. I appreciate you guys stopping by. If you haven't been here before, go check out the other content on the channel, of course. If you haven't seen the series before, what we do is go through kind of my quick thoughts on the episode, my favorite character, which is our Hawkins hero, my least favorite character, which is our mouth breather, or sometimes mouth breathers, and then a score out of 10 to kind of round it out. Some things I really liked about this episode, guys. Love the character dynamics here. We get Steve, who apologizes to Nancy, and he's like, hey, sorry, I was a dick. And it seems like a very genuine and sincere apology. And having watched this episode, I just recently watched Free Guy, which Joe Keery is in. He's like, oh, can we go get a movie? And she's like, I gotta go. She's like really tied up with Jonathan still, and they're trying to find out what's going on with the Demogorgon and the Upside Down. And we find out at the end of the episode, obviously, as Nancy is going through there, but we'll get into that in just a bit. Another thing I really like, guys, obviously the Flea and the Acrobat example where they go to the AV teacher, and I think his name is Mr. Anderson, and they go over and he tells them like, oh, you know, what if we were trying to get into like an evil dimension, like an Upside Down? They're like, theoretically, how would we do that? And he's like, well, there's the Acrobat and the Flea, right? So the Acrobat goes left or right, but he's like, the Flea, on the other hand, kind of mixes things up because it can go on the side or it can go underneath. And they're like, okay, so we're the Acrobat. He's like, right. And they're like, so how do we get to go underneath? And they're like, well, you need a tremendous amount of force. And he's like, it's not possible. Humans can't go that fast. And they're like, well, what if it was possible? And he's like, I think we would know about that. And he says it would cause a huge magnetic disturbance there, you know, folds the paper and then pokes the pen through to kind of create a doorway. And then I thought of Interstellar, where it's kind of the same idea, where they're trying to get back and they don't have time and fuel. Hopper frantically searching for his apartment. So Hopper, at the beginning of this episode, sneaks right into the CIA facility, goes in there. Again, Hopper's willing to do anything, whatever it takes. And I mentioned it last time, guys, but he's literally just like infiltrating this facility. He takes the key card, he's going through. He finds the doorway to the Upside Down. And he's like, what the hell is going on here? He knows something's wrong. And then he gets knocked out and they like inject his neck with something, but he wakes up in his apartment and he's got no like marks or anything, but he remembers everything. So he's like, what the hell's going on? So that's when he goes through and he finally finds that they plugged his light. And so eventually he goes to Joyce's house. Joyce and Lonnie get in a fight, and Lonnie's trying to, you know, get money for accidental death or something. And I don't know if he's trying to sue Joyce or what's going on, but he's clearly just here for the money. And she's like, oh my God, I knew you would just come here for the money. And then she's like, I haven't needed you in a long time. All that stuff is great. But Hopper is like, he's like, don't say any. He has a sign that says, don't say anything. He goes in there and he takes off he's like, oh, Jesus. He takes off all the Christmas lights. There's no bugs there. And he's like, hey, I think they're on to me. He's like, Joyce, I went to the morgue. It was a fake body. And he's like, you were right. You were right the whole time. And Joyce is just like relieved, dude. She's like, she's like, it's time to pop some champagne, dude, because I was telling you I was right. So obviously it's great because Joyce is telling Lonnie, like, don't give me that look like I'm crazy. Everyone says I'm crazy. And then for her to get that vindication, it's like, so nice. So that was awesome. Obviously, we get the group going to find the doorway with the compasses. That's a nice scene. Mike explains the premise of the Upside Down. They go and they're like, oh, true north. They're like, sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? So he's like, true north. And all the compasses are facing north. So that's going to lead us to the doorway. And then it turns out that 11 actually used her powers to flip north so that it heads them back home, and then they get in a fight, and then Lucas gets thrown, seriously injured for a second, and because Elle freaks out and she's like, stop, and loses her control. We get a flashback as well to Elle and Papa once again, and we find out that Elle went into this frightening tube. They were kind of using the Upside Down, so she's being used to, like, I think as a hitman or at least a spy on like some dude in Russia. She walks up and like puts on this head thing or whatever and goes into this tank of water, and they lock it up and they close the front. Papa's like, hey, like in front, and then they close the thing. It's got to be completely dark. And then it's a really cool effect because she goes in, it's all pitch black around her, and there's just one like Russian dude talking, and it's almost like she can go there, like an out of body experience, but it turns bad because she hears, like, the guy goes away and she hears like the Demogorgon presumably coming. And so she freaks out. That's kind of how she remembers it not being safe. And that stuff is all good. Elle leaves at the end. And then, of course, at the end, guys, we have Nancy and Jonathan going through the woods at night. And it's like, maybe not the best idea. but they're determined to figure this thing out. They do have a cute scene where they're shooting guns, and she's like, you're supposed to hit the cans, right? And then Jonathan basically tells her, like, I don't think my parents are to love each other. Or if they did, it wasn't when I was born. And Nancy says, I'm basically in the same boat. She's like, my mom married my dad because he had a nice job, and we started our nuclear family because he had money, and then that's pretty much it. And so it's like it's two broken families, really. So that's kind of how they start bonding. They actually start coming to life, like some of the issues that were happening before. And I really, really like that they touch on this. So she says, like, you shouldn't have taken those pictures. And they're like flirting at first, but then like things get real. But Jonathan's dropping like truth bombs where he's like, I saw you and you weren't trying to be someone that you weren't. You were finally could be yourself. And she's like, that's bullshit. She's like, I'm not trying to be someone else. And he's like, oh, please, you're stereotypical, like just like your mom. He's like get with the jock, settle down, have a family, and live the boring lifestyle. And then like she's like, oh, and she like knows it's like he's throwing truth daggers at her, dude. He's like, I don't have to like Steve, do I? And she's like, no, of course not. And he's like, good, because I don't like a lot of people. He's in the vast majority. And so they kind of get in a fight, but they keep going through, and then like the imminent danger is like what's keeping them together. So they find a deer. They think it's got hit by like a car. Clearly it wasn't. It's got like neck marks, dude. Like thought Voldemort was going to pop out, but clearly the Demogorgon got it. And then they're like looking at it, and the Demogorgon drags it away. And somehow they didn't see the Demogorgon, even though they're right next to it, because they're about to shoot it. It's weird because they would have seen it. But anyway, Nancy finds a hole in the tree, and it's all gooey. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then she starts crawling in, and I was like, why, Nancy? Why would you do that? It's a really cool visual effect, though, because she goes through and she's in the upside down now, kind of like the parallel universe that we hear the science teacher talk about. She goes through, and then it's like on the other side of the tree, but everything's dark, and her flashlight starts breaking because of the magnetic energy that we talked about. And so she sees a Demogorgon feasting, and then there's always a branch, guys. There's always a branch that the character steps on. It's really cliche, but I mean, there's the wood, so it makes sense. But she's looking at Demogorgon, and she steps on a branch, and it just like opens its four mouths at her, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And she starts going back towards the tree, but she's screaming out for Jonathan, and Jonathan, who was like missing for a second, but then he was like just around the corner. Apparently, I don't know how he wasn't sticking close to her, but he was probably looking at something. And he comes back. He's like, Nancy, where are you? And he's right next to the tree, and the tree just starts closing up, dude. And it's like, oh no, Nancy is going to be trapped in their side, and that is how the episode ends. Okay, guys, the Hawkins hero for this one, I'm actually going to go with Lucas. I thought Lucas was great in this episode. He is questioning Eleven. He's questioning Mike, and he's like, oh, Mike, you're going with blinders in, basically, because he's like, this is the only girl that doesn't think you're gross. And he's like, it's not true. And, Eleven's trying to help us out. And he's like, what do you mean Eleven's helping us out? He brought us to Will's house, and Will wasn't there. She hasn't helped us find Will at all. Lucas is asking the hard-hitting questions, and he's like, I know she was the one who did that because, like, she was bleeding, and he like takes her arm away and it shows the blood, and Mike's like, no, that's old blood, right? And Elle's like, it's not old blood. They get in a fight, and then obviously she ends up hurting Lucas, and so this is gonna like just kind of rift them apart, and they can't really trust Elle, and now they're wondering if they made a mistake, but they obviously know Will is alive. They want to find him and bring him back. So this is a big, I think, episode for the group or the kids, and Lucas, I think, really, really does an excellent job here of acting like a leader and, again, asking the hard hitting questions and being like, oh, what are we doing here? Like, we gotta like take a step back, and maybe we shouldn't have 4 kids just go into a door to the other dimension. And Eleven says like, it's not safe. And so she's actually kind of saving them, but they're frustrated because they're trying to find Will. And it's like, you should be telling us, not just having us like tricking us into going back home. So yeah, it was a very strong episode, guys. And Lucas, I think, stood out the most. Okay, guys, mouth breather for this one. It's got to be Lonnie. I mean, Lonnie sucks. He comes back home, and we know from the beginning that he's kind of a deadbeat when Jonathan goes to see him. And when he comes back, we know he's not here to comfort Joyce. We know he's not here to do good. He makes some good points where he's like, Joyce, look at you. You got Christmas lights everywhere. He's like, the family's apart. But Joyce is like, at least I was here, dude. You weren't here. And it's like, ooh, she's got you there, Lonnie. He's like a scam artist. He's trying to come in here to get money, and he doesn't actually care about the family. And he doesn't care about Jonathan, and he doesn't even know what Will looks like, as Jonathan mentioned when he had brought the wanted poster. And so Lonnie just sucks, and he's just I like the actor's performance, but he's a well-written character because you don't like him. And I think he's just the worst one in an episode. It was a really strong cast, and I think he just kind of stood out as being the worst part of this episode. Okay, guys, that brings us to the score. This is a 9.5. This is a very strong episode. Between Hopper's apartment getting bugged and him finding the door and him getting knocked out, and he's like, yo, the CIA is onto me. I know they're onto me. And he's like, I thought your place was bugged too. And he checked all the lights, obviously, to find out more stuff about Elle and how we kind of figure out how they were using her and how that she goes into the Upside Down, or maybe this isn't the Upside Down, although Will did say it was really dark. But this is just straight out like darkness. This is really cool how she goes into like either the mind of this guy, or she can like travel to another spot on the planet. It's crazy. It's incredible. And then we get obviously the group dynamic, which I mentioned, guys. We get more in Elle. Can we trust Elle? We know that Elle means well, but they don't trust Elle yet. And so they're trying to figure out what's going on. It's really, really cool to see like the CIA are the bad people, but they're also kind of dabbling in the Upside Down. And do they know about, I'm sure they know about a Demigorgon. What's Papa's deal? That's all really fun, guys. But yeah, just a really, really strong episode. And it's fun because everything's starting to ramp up. And it's just, man, it's just a really good season. Okay, guys. Well, that's it for another episode of Talkin Hawkins. That's our 5th episode, guys, of season 1. So thanks for checking out the channel. I appreciate you stopping by. Like, comment, subscribe if you did like the content. Until next time, guys. Peace.